Hello there, viewers. Yes, this is Dr. Dog. Yes, and this today is Dr. Dog's camp basement. That's right. And I'm going to play a little song for you now, which I'm sure you'll all enjoy. A song I used to play back in Borneo. Yes, that's right. This song is called Fly, Little Birdie, Fly. Here we go. Fly, oh little birdie, won't you fly? Yes?
Dr. Dog, what the hell are you doing? This is T-Dog's Brutal Basement, not Dr. Dog's flipping whatever.
That's why I'm easy. I'm easy like Sunday morning. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, today, it's T-Dog's Brutal Basement with Al.
Yay!
So, we're doing something a little bit different tonight. We're looking at Keenan, the wonderful guitarist from Down and Corrosion of Conformity and probably some other bands I've not heard of. But anyway, point is, we're going to look at some of his riffs, yeah, and we're going to discuss them and his influence on me and other people and all that kind of stuff. So, welcome back to T-Dog's Brutal Basement. Sorry about Dr. Dog, you know, he gets in here sometimes, it's a pain in the bum to be honest with you. But anyway, let's look at some riffs.
So, what is it that influenced you in, or what brought you to listening to Corrosion of Conformity?
What brought me to listening to them? Well, the CD player. Well, I'm serious. You ask a stupid question, get a stupid answer. I think what you were trying to ask is, like, why did I start listening to them? I've always been into heavy metal and stuff, since I can remember. And back in the early 90s, I started to get into different things. I stopped listening to so much thrash and Slayer and Megadeth and that kind of stuff. And got more into sort of, I guess, classic rock sounding stuff. And COC seemed to sort of slot right into that category very well. But they're with a more of an edge, you know, they've got more of a dynamic edge, the more sort of sludgy and I guess sort of bluesy. You said, you know, they've got like a really interesting sort of like tone.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the two bands that Keenan is in.
Yeah,
and
massive difference.
All to do with tone. And so if you listen to Deliverance album, the first album from Corrosion of Conformity.
It's not the first album.
Correct me.
Sorry, it's not the first album, but yeah, the first album you got into.
Yeah, so the first album I was introduced to was
Yeah.
Deliverance, and being a big Down fan at the time, being introduced to NOLA, their album, and then hearing that compared to Deliverance, the two tones are very different. So, for example, in Corrosion of Conformity, Keenan's guitar is very gritty, it's very crunchy, it's very up there and in your face.
Yeah.
It's got some depth, it's got some brightness to it as well. Whereas Down is more flowing, so the change from notes and chords are just moving into each other
I think it's
Whereas-
also a heavier tone though.
It is.
You know, they're a heavier band, definitely, because you know you've got Phil Anselmo, one of the best metal singers ever. You know, in that band. I mean, you know, Pantera were a heavy band. I know, you know, we'll probably get slated. People saying it's dad rock and stuff, but you know, obviously we're a bit older. But yeah, to me, like Pantera were like one of the heaviest bands I ever got into, and I never really liked that sort of screamy stuff. I liked singers, you know. I mean, the first band I got into was Metallica, and obviously they've got a singer. You know, James Hetfield sings. I mean, he yells a bit, but you know, he's not like one of these sort of metalcore singers, which just seem to be way more popular these days, which is cool. I mean, I'd not have a problem with that because it's just not my cup of tea. So I was never really into that sort of screamo sort of stuff. So obviously, for me, like the way Phil sings, the way Pantera sounded was right up my street. You know, absolutely loved it. And yeah, that sort of deep south, Louisiana,
New Orleans.
New Orleans. Thank you. Sorry. Sort of there's like a hub of music there, with these different bands. You know, you've got like Corrosion Conformity, obviously Down. You've got bands like
The Melvins came from that area.
Helmet, I think.
Yeah.
There's quite a few bands that sound
Yeah.
kind of similar. You know,
And-
you've got thrash bands sound similar. You know, you've got indie bands that have got a similar sound. You know, all these different genres.
And I think
You know.
at the time there was the whole Seattle sound movement, and then there was this new kind of earthy, gritty sound coming
Yeah.
from New Orleans, and hence the title of the Down album is called NOLA, which is all about that. So there was a group of them. You've got Phil Anselmo, you've got Mike Williams from I Hate God, massive mates, and there's a lot of interesting stories about guitars, particularly to do with the Hurricane Katrina when that happened, and when Phil wrote to New Orleans as a dying whore, there's a lyric in there about, you know, underwater staircases, and there's an interview of him before that, and he didn't really know what he was writing about at the time, and then Hurricane Katrina struck at that time. So the next question I want to ask you is, how has Pepper Keenan and these two bands moulded your style? How have they created what you play, how you use the notes on the guitar?
Yeah, well, for me, when I started playing, when I was 16, young lad that I was, it's been a long time. Well, you're not. Point is that I was always into sort of concert pitch tuning, you know, sort of regular tuning. Most of the stuff you hear, pop charts, you know, is in concert pitch, and that was all I kind of knew. And you know, most sort of Metallica stuff is in that sort of tuning, most of it, and I sort of picked up on that and started learning their riffs and stuff when I started learning guitar, bit of Iron Maiden and that kind of stuff, and different tunings, the way sort of, especially the way Corrosion of Conformity sound versus, you know, that sort of concert pitch, you know, standard pitch, heavy guitar sound, which is cool. There's a difference, and I think you get a much grittier sound when you detune your guitar, when you get into that sort of thing. But that was something that kind of frightened me, to be honest, when I first started playing, because I didn't understand it. I had no idea about music theory. You know, I used to learn everything by ear. I had a couple of guitar lessons, but it was always, you know, standard pitch, like this is how you tune your guitar, you know, and I kind of thought everything was in that tuning. And then, like I say, I got into these bands and noticed there's a big difference. And what is it about their tone? Then I sort of started exploring that, getting more into different tunings, and now that's you know, I play a lot more in different tunings than I ever do in standard pitch now. So that's definitely one of the ways it's changed my playing. You know, I love that now. You know, I totally embraced it, whereas before, you know, I didn't. you know, I avoided it, to be honest with you, because I just didn't understand it. So, you know, and the thing about Pepper is that, I mean, every guitarist puts their own spin on things, obviously. That's why, you know, you hear a riff and it's kind of unique, you know, and it doesn't really sound like anybody else. All the sort of good stuff, you know. But with Pep, he does some interesting things. I've noticed that some of these things, you know, carry over into different bands.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, on the song Albatross, yeah, there's a part where he's going, so there where it goes. So going into the chorus riff, you've got that nice down, which is just a semitone. And I don't know, it sounds more than that, but it's just a power chord sliding up one fret. I mean, to me, it's kind of magical, really. You know, and it's going from, and then it goes back to the same note for the chorus, but it's a different riff, so you get that nice effect of, you know, it sounds very different, as opposed to just, you know, he could have gone, you know, but then that'd be boring, you know. But it's effectively the same thing. You know, he's playing around with that chord, you know, in this tuning, which I really like, you know. And like I said, that carries over. So, like Temptation's "Wings" by Down, when it's going into the chorus, it's going again, that semitone thing into the chorus, which is sort of a popular thing that he does, and I really like that. It's different. I've not really, I mean, I suppose obviously there are obviously guitarists that do that, but because I've analysed his playing a bit, I've learned quite a few Pepper riffs, you know, that's like a common thing for him, and I think it's cool, you know. It might be something that, I don't know if he's thought about it, you know, sort of made it his own thing, but it's almost like a staple thing that he does, and I like that, you know, that's cool. I like it when guitarists have, you know, a little hooky thing that they do that nobody else really does, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that transition from where the time of the music was, and so for instance, you look at Pantera and you look at what Pantera were influenced by, and it's realistically, it's punk but slowed down, so it's nice and heavy, like you said about the power chords, but then all of a sudden it's got this dirty blues that you've just played in the chorus bit, and that's just, I think that's just something me and you kind of love. That's kind of our genre to go to. I mean, I'm sure lots of people, you know, obviously thousands of people would agree, you know, who like that sort of music. But like you said, it's always been that sort of mixture of like punk and heavy metal, that sort of punk rock attitude with, you know, sort of, but guitars, you know, played better. I can't think of a better word, but you know, I don't want to say sort of talent, because that's not a fair thing to say. It's the same. It's almost the same thing with the power chords and the way the shapes are, but everything's just kind of more relaxed, but it's got the same heaviness that hits you. It hits you harder. I think that's probably why I like it. The transition from this thrash kind of thing that's coming out of the 80s now into the 90s. And then, you know, you've got bands like COC and Down, and then the Melvins, and this stems all the way back to Black Sabbath. They were probably doing this way before, and that's where the influence of this stoner rock, southern blues, dirty blues kind of sound comes from. And that's where that subgenre goes. Whereas thrash, not slash. You know, they're still doing thrash, and that's great. And then it's just the same thing, just with a different style of play, a different attitude to the music. And I think even us as a band, really, we kind of embrace that in our own way and make it our own.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, you know, as musicians, we take influences from, you know, everywhere and make them our own. And I really like the way sort of, again, Metallica's early stuff, you know, is very punky. Corrosion and Conformity's early stuff is very punky, you know. But it's like, punk rock was that thing where, you know, this is something that anybody can do. You know,
yeah.
That was, it was accessible to everybody. Before that, you know, you'd got all these bands that were like Yes and Pink Floyd, and there's nothing wrong with those bands, but you know, they were sort of quite grandiose in the way they played. You know, what's his face out of Yes doing, you know, 15-minute piano solos and stuff. You know, very sort of progressive music, which, you know, some of that's brilliant. You know, you wouldn't have bands like Tool if it wasn't for Yes and people like that. But the thing is, punk was born out of that as a reaction to that kind of music. As like, no, that's too fancy. You know, we want some much more sort of meat and potatoes music, if you like. But a lot of those kids, you know, in these sort of early 70s punk bands couldn't play it. You know, that's why punks, you know, got a lot of very straightforward chord sequences, basic chords, but it was about the attitude. It wasn't about how they played. And then sort of COC and Metallica and bands like that, I feel like they took that that attitude, but they could play better. You know, so that's where you get that sort of grittiness and the look and everything. You know, the sort of ripped clothes, etc. But you know, the music was way better. You know. I think that was really cool.
So moving on from that, I'm going to give a small anecdote here into the kind of mind of Phil Anselmo a little bit. So Hurricane Katrina happened, and obviously Down by Darrell died. And what happened to his guitar during that stage was it was washed away from his studio.
I don't know any of this, by the way.
And Phil Anselmo's studio got ruined in the floods in the big hurricane. And he obviously realised, hang on a minute, that, you know, my best mate's guitar is gone. So he put out a kind of wanted almost poster around the place, because somebody must have found it. And
that's cool.
He put like a sort of ransom for it, there's like $1,000 if you find the guitar. I really want this guitar back. And somebody found it and just gave it him back. Like how fortunate, how lucky is that in this whole grand hurricane that his guitars remained, and that kind of it's remained throughout. And I know you're a big Down by Darrell fan, and I can tell that it's influenced you into moving from that to listening to Down and bands like COC. So how has that transition from listening to Down by Darrell and the way he plays influenced you in playing this?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, like, as much as I do love Dimebag and the stuff that he did, I mean, obviously he was an influence on me, but that the way he played is something that for me I feel like is unobtainable. Like, I'm not a great lead player. The way he could sort of shred, I've never been able to do that kind of thing. You know, I got into playing solos through playing blues and stuff, and it's only because that's the kind of stuff that Pepper Keenan does. So I feel a lot more comfortable in that sort of genre where I can, you know, it's got a heavy riff, a heavy sort of bluesy-ish riff, and then when it comes to guitar solo, it's just kind of a pentatonic workout, which, you know, I can, after all these years, can kind of do in my sleep now, and that makes it really enjoyable, because I'm not worrying about, you know, like that phenomenal guitar solo that you know is coming up in that Pantera song that I'm playing or whatever, you know. I could, I mean, like, I could do that, like, if I spent all my time learning that, but I've always, you know, I like bands, I like the whole thing, I like what the drummer's doing, what the bass player's doing, what the guitarist's doing, what the singer's doing. So I've kind of gone more towards as a bit more of a multi-instrumentalist, whereas, you know, I think that's like, I can sort of create a song and see how every part of it works together, whereas somebody like Dimebag or Eddie Van Halen, God rest his soul, who's just passed away. You know, those kind of players were just amazing guitarists. You know,
Yeah,
and whereas I want to be a competent musician, you know, and be able to cover all bases. So I think that's why I'm more into people like Pepper Keenan and James Hetfield and, you know, players like that who are very good at what they do but aren't sort of as virtuosic as virtuosic, that's a good word, isn't it?
Ah yes, virtuosic. Very good word, Dog. Well done. It means displaying or characterized by exceptional technical skill in music or another artistic pursuit.
Doggy!
Yes, my love?
Your tea's ready. Quick on.
Oh, sorry, I've got to go now. My tea's ready. Ta-ta!
You know, as sort of Dimebag and, you know, Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai, you know, people like that. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the Emporium of Pop. We've got way more stuff coming out and content. We love to, you know, look at different bands and review them and talk about stuff. You know, we love music at the Emporium, so please, if there's any bands out there that you feel like don't get enough recognition, you know, you feel like, you know, people need to hear more of them, please tell us in the comments below. Again, if you want to tell us what you like, what you don't like, please comment. You know, this is our bread and butter. Please let us know, and we'll get back to you next time on Emporium Pop. Thanks again. Cheers. Goodbye.